Hey everyone! So today we are going to do a comparison of the Korilynn Neocolor II Aquarelle crayons, the Mungyo Aquarelle oil pastels, which are water soluble, and the Lyra Aquacolor crayons. I had a request to compare Neocolor to Mungyo, and I've had requests to compare Lyra to Mungyo, and basically a combination of these, and so I just decided, you know what, let's just do a comparison of them all together at once. So there is a video already on my channel from a few months ago comparing the Lyra and the Neocolor, but that's specific to adult coloring because I used them for adult coloring backgrounds. In this one, I'm going to show you how they work dry, blending and all that, smudging, and then blending wet and everything, just so you can get an idea and see if it's the artist's crayon you want to use for adult coloring or your actual commissioned art pieces. So let's get started. Alright, so first things first is we're going to do a quick overview of what each one looks like and the colors that you get in the sets. Now I have obviously different size sets, so you may, if you have the smaller sets, have different colors, but I do have the Korilynn 84, so that means this is the biggest set. I know back in the day they had 120 something, but they discontinued, narrowed down, and here you go. So this is the Neocolor. All right, so it's Neocolor II. Please keep in mind we're talking about the two. Number one is not water soluble, but they work great for creating some cool effects. But today we're specifically on the Neocolor II. As you can see, it has the AP stamp. It gives you their little color code number here. These are available open stock, which is important if you're an artist because obviously we go through different colors at different times. It has the color name, barcode, and then I believe they don't have the light fast on there, but they do have it on their chart. Okay, so this came in the box. It was actually part of the sleeve. So here you go. You can see it was on the back. So you like rip it off and you can swatch it, and then it just nestles in here. So it's kind of handy. But as you can see, this is a really balanced range of colors. My only complaint is I feel like we got way too much brown going on in there, especially because, well, I can make brown by mixing colors. It's like one of the easiest colors to make because I do it by accident. But I do feel that it was a little brown heavy. I do love the selection of blues as well, but it's great that they have their light fastness on here. So 1 is good, 2 stars is very good, 3 stars is excellent. Now these are done against ASTM standards, which means basically if you have this 3-star here, it can withstand gallery conditions. Okay, so they have quite a few that are 3-star. I mean, look at this right here, this row alone. So most are 3 and 2. You only have a few that are actually just a 1. So like this olive brown is a 1, mauve and lilac and violet. And purple violet. It's hard to make a light fast purple. So, I'm not surprised there. But that said, their aubergine is, 3 stars. So, got a variety. Of course, it depends on how you're going to use them. Are you going to use them dry or are you going to use them wet? I have a thing with light fastness, and when you wet and activate something, that does affect the overall outcome, especially the more water you add, or if you're activating it on a palette and then taking it from that palette and putting it on paper. So those do impact the outcome, which is why, as we go through our comparison today, I will at the bottom create some that will test specifically off the palette as well. And I'm going to hang this in a window, and in a few months, we'll check back in and do a small video on how the light fast testing went. All right, so those are the Neocolors. They do come in this stellar case. I leave them in there. If they've got the bubble wrap, each crayon is like nestled in, and underneath this tray is another layer of bubble wrap. I mean, these things are not going to get broken being in the case. That's why I leave them there, because they're not cheap. All right, so let's do the Mungyo. Now, the Mungyo are definitely the cheapest in the bunch, but as you can see, they roll constantly out of their packaging. So here is the two Mungyo sets. Now these are oil, whereas Korilynn VanDyke and Lyra are a wax-based pastel, or should I say water-soluble crayon. But the Mungyo come in the 24 artist colors and 24 pearlescent, so nice and shimmery. They both have really pretty artwork. It's like the same artwork, they just change the colors of the flowers. But I'll just pop these open. These were actually gifted to me. Now, as you can see, they are pretty messy on the inside of the packaging, and that's because these are not very well packaged. But then again, these are very cheap, so you know what you get, what you pay for. Like this one broke. You can see all the wax residue, or oil, I should say. Sorry, oil pastel residue. Same thing here. Although my pearlescent set got beaten up a lot more than my other one. Now color-wise, so when you flip it over, this is where you get the information, and it tells you the color name and their number. And these are soft oil pastels, but they're water soluble, so that means you can use them wet or dry, just as you could a Korilynn Neocolor. Only difference is most people for Neocolors will switch to the Neocolor I if they want them dry. Okay. Here are the colors of the pearlescent set, and then here are the regular. Now, you get the same exact colors, it's just one is pearlescent, one is not. So for example, like here's the violet. It's a very pretty color, by the way. So you can see I have the violet there dry, and then I have it there wet. Here's the violet in the pearlescent, and you can see the slight shimmer. There we go. So it has like some blue tinge coming through. Really pretty, and they're still soft, so that's always nice to, you know, have the option of wet or dry. But you are getting the same colors. It's just one's going to be shimmery, one's not. So a total technically of 48 colors, and they do vary from one another pretty significantly because of that shimmer effect. So if you don't want the shimmeriness, then just go with the regular 24 set. But I do think it's a great range of colors, and you can mix these to make more. So you don't need an 84 count set of crayons to get the job done. But the pastels here, I'm going to switch between the word pastel and crayons, and I'm sure I'll get comments, but it's kind of like it's not an either or situation. So here's the pearlescent. They are open on the back end, just as the Neocolors. They're a lot more fat in size, so they're wider, but they're shorter. Then the other set has a different packaging. So it's like gold wrapped, but still same thing, same size. So let's grab our Lyras now. Okay, now the Lyra set here, let me pop that up. These were actually gifted to me, so I'm very appreciative of that. So here you go. These are a little bit more like the Neocolor in terms of how they, the width, and then they just look more like a crayon. So they say Aquarelle, and then Aquacolor is the brand name, or I should say the series name. Wow, today's not with me. Here's the color, light carmine, and then I don't believe they have the light fastness on here. They do not, but they do have it on the packaging, not inside the lid. It's on the wrap that goes with it. But here are the colors. Now, these, say you compare to Mungyo, right? You can kind of see how quickly these dull out in color compared to Mungyo. Let me see, like vermilion and vermilion. Now this one's a little more red leaning than this one, but I mean, you can kind of see how this washed out pretty quickly, whereas this did not. We're going to do a test side by side on paper though, so because this is a swatch and every swatch was done different. That said, you can tell these are a lot more vibrant, but you get more colors here. And I actually enjoy the Lyra. I know they are cheaper, and you know, some of them didn't exactly, activate like I wanted. So I had a few that didn't compared to the Neocolor. So, you know, it just kind of depends on what you're doing. But if you're doing like adult coloring and you're not doing, you know, anything artist grade, like where you're going to sell it for commissioned, honestly, these are the more budget friendly options and still give you pretty backgrounds without spending a fortune. So now we are going to do a side-by-side test of some colors from each one. I'll even throw in a Pearlescent. Okay, so I have all my swatch charts here. I think I am going to test out the vermilion from each set, simply because it's a kind of a, I want to see the different, you know, orange and red versions we've got. I'll probably test out our violets because I believe we have, does this one have a violet? No, it only has a magenta. Interesting. I never even noticed this doesn't have an actual purple up in there. It has blue violet, but it only has magenta, so we'll have to use something close to it. So we've got a magenta in the Mungyo. So I'll use this purple from Neocolor, which is kind of close to the magenta. Well, that's good to note because, yeah, there's no dark purple. Like, they don't have a violet. I mean, even Mungyo has that. Come on. Step it up, Lyra. And then I want to test a green and a blue. So, yeah, let's do that. Okay. So first thing we're going to do is I'm going to grab some Neocolor colors and I'm going to swatch them dry, and then we'll also go in and do a swatch for wet. Then we'll do a swatch for off the palette. Okay, so we have our little handy dandy test chart. As you can see, I'm going to just test these three colors and see how they feel when they're dry. Are they softer or are they harder? Because if you plan to use them dry later on, that's rather important, right? You don't want a hard crayon. Otherwise, that's just a pain. And then I'm going to do a little blending. I'll pick a couple of colors that are close to one another and blend them dry. And then I'll take these same colors as above, but activate them wet just so we can see how they look. And then I'll also activate them wet from the palette, meaning I'll scratch them onto the palette, activate them, and put them down here just so you can see if there's a difference from activating them straight on your paper versus here. And there will be a difference because your paper obviously will determine how it's going to activate on that paper. So if you want consistency, put them on a palette. But, you know, that's just me. And just as a fun fact for all of these, when you go to sharpen these, do not stick them in a pencil sharpener or anything that has any wood pieces, graphite, whatever, because remember, you're sharpening the actual product, usable product. So what you should be doing is either use a palette or craft knife, not a palette knife, or just have a designated sharpener. I have a designated sharpener because I'm too lazy to get out a knife. But what I do is any sharpenings I have, you can store them in like a little tin, or you can put them on a watercolor palette. And guess what? You can turn these into little watercolors. So again, sharpening is great, but don't waste those little sharpening gems. So I am going to speed this up with music because if you guys sat here watching me do the entire process, you would be here for ages. So I'm going to fill this out and then we'll chat about the results at the end. Okay, so never try to do a chart while you're on lack of coffee and sleep. But I accidentally like switched those, and even while I was doing it, I was like, what on earth? But I wasn't about to start over with a new chart. And then I activated that vermilion. So let me put that back. I totally forgot to correct that one. But yeah, you guys know me. I don't like to edit. I like to keep it real, and mistakes happened. There we go. Okay. So let's first talk about how they perform dry, and specifically how soft they are. Now, the Neocolor II, I kind of mark as an in-between. I wouldn't say they're hard and scratchy or difficult or anything like that, but they're not soft either. So I call them an in-between. Let me zoom you guys in since we're talking about just this chart now. Now, the Mungyo are definitely soft. So soft that they kind of crumble a little bit, but these are meant to act like oil pastels. And to be honest, they were designed to be both dry and wet. So that is one thing to keep in mind on that front. Now, the Lyra, I actually find kind of hard. Even in a few of the colors I had were scratchy. So they're a lot harder to me when dry. Now, blending them when dry, I also activated the bottom half just to show you how they blend when wet. Now, this is a toothier paper, but that's kind of important to note because if you're doing like adult coloring, the paper is going to determine the outcome. I typically use my Neocolors on all types of paper because they dissolve really well, whereas the others I do not, and you will see why. All right, so blending dry. Because the Mungyo are so flippin' soft, like they blended dry, and if I want to use my finger and smudge them or anything like that, they're gonna be perfect. But when they go to blend wet, they actually kind of lose some of their oomph. So that's just a fun little fact there. Now the Lyra, because they're so hard feeling and very dry and scratchy, they don't blend dry very well at all. But they also, when I put them in like this gradient, didn't activate on this toothy paper as well as I would have liked. So that was kind of interesting, but so like on my swatch chart paper, this is a very smooth cardstock. So they activated, although I did mention I had a few, as you can see there, you still see the lines. Well, on toothier paper, the Lyra do even worse. So stay away from the toothy paper. If you're a Strathmore fan, yeah. Now, Neocolor II, actually they didn't blend too badly dry considering, but I prefer them wet. Now, this gradient here did not blend very well or perform, but I've blended these things a bajillion times on paper, and they come together a lot better. Now it could just be because this is a toothier paper. I don't know. But that said, you can see here when activated on the paper, say we put them on there directly and then activate them, you can tell what activated well directly on the paper, and that is Neocolor and Lyra. They both did really well. Mungyo did, well, crap. So, like, I mean, look, you can legit see the color put down there. Like, so if you put these as your background, say in an adult coloring book, I would not put the crayon straight to the paper or the pastel, because as you can see here, like, blatant, clear as day, I can see what I put down. Lyra comes out a lot smoother, so as you can see there, you're not seeing my lines as if it was dry. Same thing with the Neocolor. Now, when it comes to activating them wet, can we just talk about how almost perfect these matches are right here? Like, I was putting them down, I'm like, oh, they're so close. When it comes to activating them wet from the palette, which is over here, that gives you the smoothest color for all three. I mean, really, like, look at that. But what we want to see is, okay, well, how much pigment are we losing, okay? So, you know the Mungyo, you can't just activate them straight on the paper, especially it looks like this magenta color and this Prussian blue. The vermilion did okay, but like, you don't want to do guesswork on something that's permanent, right? So obviously they're going to be lighter when they come off the palette, because you're basically turning them into watercolor, so they're going to be more transparent. That said, you know, the color isn't too shabby. It's just a little lighter. The blue really lost its luster, but it really didn't have, like, I mean, when it's dry, that's a pretty blue. But yeah, when it's wet, it's just not a pretty blue. Now, Neocolor II, here we have, like, you know, for example, the colors wet and activated on the paper versus the palette. Again, more transparent because you're making it more into watercolor. But the colors are very pretty and smooth and even, so that's a good sign. Lyra Aquacolor, I would say, honestly, I'm surprised at how vibrant those stayed coming off the palette. Now, their Prussian blue is a little bit more vibrant anyway, so that's something to keep in mind, but still that color change is not as crazy as like the color change from these ones. But when you compare them, it's not too bad on the Neocolor and the Lyra. So what would I say for adult coloring? Because, you know, I don't do commissioned artwork. I'm not really selling my artwork. So I'm going to give you from the adult coloring perspective. I love the Mungyo pastels. They're really pretty, but I would definitely recommend using them on the palette if you're going to use them wet, just because of the way they activate or lack thereof. That said, when they're used dry, these things are smooth and buttery. You can make a killer background with these things dry. Just gotta watch them wet. I would say pull them off the palette. Neocolor II, honestly, you can do either or. I would not use these dry in an adult coloring book simply because they just go get the Neocolor ones if you want to go dry. So, Lyra, you could use wet in a coloring book. They would be fine. The color is really nice and vibrant, even on this toothy paper. But yeah, I mean, you could also just pull it off the palette. But here may be what kind of helps you decide what's best for you. Let's talk price, okay? Now, if you are doing adult coloring, these Mungyo pastels, now they're, again, oil pastels, so they're meant to be dry or wet. You get the Mungyo for $10.85 as of the time I'm filming this, so please check the date and don't comment a year from now that the price has changed. So the 24 assorted, which are not the pearlescent, that's $10.85. The Pearlescent are $12.99. Obviously, you're paying a little more for that shimmer, but we all love glitter, right? Now, you don't have light fast ratings on these. That said, I looked online. I could not find anything about their light fast testing or rating. I even looked at, art supply stores that were selling them. So I was kind of surprised that they didn't list it. So I don't know if they're out there. You can let me know. But if you're an adult colorist, the light fastness really doesn't affect your outcome because it's in a book that you close and stick on the shelf. So it could be 200 years from now. Who cares? Right? We're not doing gallery lighting here. But if you want light fastness, because maybe down the road you want to get into art or commissioned pieces, then that's something you got to keep in mind. You're getting a cheaper product, but gosh darn it, those are really soft, dry, for a pastel. Okay. The Neocolor II is the most expensive one. It's Korilynn VanDyke. Would you be surprised if it was like the cheaper one? I'd be blown out of the water if it was. Now, they have proven light fast ratings. They follow the ASTM standards. Wow, words. So, and this is coming from a company that has been around longer than I have. So they're trustworthy in that regard. So adult coloring and artists alike obviously tend to lean towards Korilynn VanDyke. That said, the 84 count set that I have is $144.27. Now, if you were going to go for like the 30 count set, which is closer to the other sets I have compared, it's $47.74, which actually isn't too shabby. I'm not going to lie. That's pretty good. It's just a little bit over $1 a crayon for if you count the 30. Now, the Lyra Aquacolor, that's these guys over here. The 48 count set, which is the one I have, is $54.96, but they do have light fast ratings on them. So that's not too bad either. They're just a little more than $1 over per crayon. But when it comes down to performance, if you are really on a budget, the Jets are with us, so sorry. When it comes down to performance, but if you're thinking long term, I honestly would say Neocolor II is the better investment, simply because you have more colors, you have more consistency, but you also have the tested light fast ratings. So, there's that, and you can get them open stock. These ones don't come open stock. You must buy a set to replace what you're missing. So you have to keep that in mind. You can also just go buy Neocolor IIs, the colors you want, from any art supply store and not even buy a set, like ever. Just go buy open stock. Say you only want the blues, or you want like a couple greens, couple pinks, but you don't want to really like buy one of the curated sets. You can go buy whatever you want, whereas these ones, you're stuck with a curated set. But, if you're really on a budget, you can go with the Lyra Aquacolor and you'll still be pleasantly surprised at the results in your adult coloring. It's just when you get down to the pennies of it, it's not a huge difference in price. Because like I said, $54.96 for 48 Aquacolors versus $47.74 for 30. Obviously the Neocolor are more, but not by much. So keep that in mind. Mungyo. If I'm going to use these in adult coloring, I am only going to activate them on a palette and paint them onto my page. However, I would gladly use them dry. So that's the thing to keep in mind is I think they're really great, but like on a toothier paper, they don't perform super well. And like even this swatching paper here, this is softer, but you can still really see the lines of the product, okay? The Pearlescents actually dissolve a little better. And in fact, I will pull out those same three colors in Pearlescent just so you can see. All right, one thing I can tell you the pastel or the Pearlescent is it's like impossible to read the teeny tiny name written in gold on this black label. But these are so soft. Like you don't have to press hard. So I'll do a wet and dry. Yeah, these things are like butter. It's so smooth. It's like insane how soft these things are. Now, obviously, we're going to get different colors from the ones above because these are pearlescent. Okay, so we have our pink here. Just get that wiped off and then I'll grab, or I should say magenta. But like I said, these ones dissolve so much better than the regular ones, which is interesting. Okay, let's grab it off the palette as well. Trying to do this in an orderly fashion. Yeah, I have some crumbs, but I'm picking them up and they dissolve with it, so I'm not too worried about it. Okay. Oh, luscious. Luscious, luscious. Okay, so shake that off because I had some dry pieces. So as you can see, the pearlescent ones are just as smooth when dry. They actually activate on paper better than the regular ones, which is kind of interesting. And then look, same kind of effect with the more watercolor, but they do have a slight shimmer still, even though they've come off the palette. So yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. But really, it's up to you guys. Like, how are you going to use them? Your budget. If you want to just dip your toes in the water, go get the smaller set of maybe Aquacolors. They do have a smaller set than the 48 that I have. Or you can even go and get a smaller set of the Mungyo, or just buy a couple open stock Neocolor IIs. Really, everyone is so different, and in our budgets, our opinions, what we do with our products, that I don't like to just say this is the winner. For me, Neocolor II is the winner, but that's based on my budget, the way I use them, and the paper I prefer to use them on as well. I stick to very smooth cardstock, so these are always going to do great for me versus like this toothy cardstock here. So I'm not really having a problem with them, but if you are more a toothy cardstock type of person, then you may want to go elsewhere. You know what I mean? So you have to keep that in mind. Paper, budget, your art style, what are you using them for? And then, yeah, if you're just doing some adult coloring for funsies and you don't want to spend a lot of money, you don't have to, but you have options. So that's my comparison of the Neocolor II, the Mungyo oil pastels. Please remember, these are the only ones that are oil. And the Lyra Aquacolor. If you have these, let me know what your favorite is between the three. And I am actually going to hang this in my window. I may remake it so it's not so messy and this is not swapped. I'll hang this in my window and maybe in 6 months pull it out and see if anything has faded. I might even add more colors in, but this will be totally another video and just for fun. So thanks for hanging out with me and checking out the variety of water-soluble crayons. Now, I wish I could say that this was the final video, but unfortunately, I have 2 other brands of water-soluble crayons that are sitting in my closet that I need to swatch, which means there will be a comparison of those. But because no one asks about those brands, and I've been specifically asked about these 3, that's why today's video has these 3 only. I will be doing a gel crayon video very soon, comparing them dry versus wet. And then, of course, the watercolor pencil battle that I've been working on. So plenty of comparisons. I like doing comparison videos. So if you have a water-soluble crayon you would like to see compared that is not one of these 3, let me know. And until next time, take care. Bye now.